Independence for America. At Independence for America, we tell the stories of state and local independent candidates. For today's episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk to Nate Smolensky, who's been in the independent space, the depolarization space for a while, and we're going to hear his story. So, good morning, Nate. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to go on the Independence for America podcast. Really appreciate it. So, tell me a little bit about your childhood, your young adulthood, and how it had an impact on what you're doing now.
So one of the things I like to say is I was exposed to sort of political polarization before it became cool. And my childhood, I think that it's not so much my family or where I grew up. It is the confluence of my family and where I grew up, insofar as I'm a first generation Soviet immigrant. There is a kind of staunch, and you'll see this from Soviet immigrants, from Cuban immigrants quite a bit. There is not a traditional conservatism, but certainly a strong fiscal conservatism, especially the ones who came, right around when Reagan was becoming popular and just before the Reagan presidency. And there was that mindset at home combined with being in the Boston area, in one of the deepest blue, this sort of mix of progressive and sort of traditional Democrat mindset that was around there. And it's just very staunch, very activist, and very much, well, this is the way we are. This is how we think.
So, how old were you when you emigrated to the United States?
I'm first generation, so I was born here.
You were born here, but your parents came from the Soviet Union.
That's
in
correct.
what year did they immigrate?
They immigrated in 1980. I was born in 1990.
Okay, all right. So you have that influence of your parents being from, they escaped from Soviet Russia and landed in this kind of very democratic, progressive area of the United States. So the Boston suburbs or something, or downtown?
Basically, yeah, Boston suburbs.
Okay.
And the sort of confluence of, very, I'd say, right-leaning or staunchly at least anti-socialist family with this very left-leaning, maybe I wouldn't quite say necessarily anti-capitalist community.
And kind of big government, baby.
Big government, absolutely. Well, big government, a mix of big government and, anti-war, all of, very dovish. And just seeing these groups and seeing them yell about how crazy the other group was, sort of, I was very lucky to be in a position where I could start to see it from afar, and I could start to see the big picture and kind of the silliness of it. And that, I think, was really formative. So as I got older, and as that kind of polarization became more mainstream, I was very aware of it and was very wary of it, because I just saw, all this unnecessary division, all this unnecessary conflict, and conflict mentality was permeating and deepening and kind of hurting relationships and hurting our ability to communicate with one another. And creating a situation that was also somewhat abusable. And that's why I was very much drawn to the bridging space, to the political innovation space, the independent space, and all of that.
So you went to Boston College. How was Boston College in forming your political identity?
It didn't really do too much of that. And to be honest, I think Boston College at that time that I went there, it was one of the less active, less politicized universities in the area. Um, and that was partially intentional because I had this sort of wariness of the activist culture and that sort of ultra political, politicize everything mindset.
Right.
But yeah, I think there was certainly some of that and some gradual buildup of there's more and more of this political energy around. I was lucky enough there to be able to meet more conservative leaning, more um, more left leaning, more right leaning individuals, as well as to be exposed to. Now, Boston College is a Jesuit university. To be exposed to those, for whom faith was a big thing, which I didn't really get growing up, and I wasn't as privy to, as exposed to growing up. So just understanding that perspective and gaining learning from that perspective, I think, was valuable for me.
Well, and you got a good liberal arts education at Boston College. So my son went to Holy Cross in Worcester, Mass. So kind of a similar Jesuit school there. So how did you end up in Florida, and how did you end up getting involved in the Forward Party? And then tell the listeners a little bit about the Forward Party.
Sure. So I was involved with Forward from 2021 to 2024. Shortly before that, my family, my family is, Soviet Jewish, and the pathway for those immigrants, for those familiar with it, they eventually end up in Florida. That's generally the rule. And so when they all moved to Florida, I kind of realized, I should probably be down there with them. So I came for family, and I realized, hey, I was in a kind of interesting position as far as just the local political activity and the local political opportunity. So this was right around the time that I was starting to be involved with Forward. And I was kind of excited to be in this third party space with some brand to it, some legitimacy to it. And that was really interesting for me. So getting involved with that and realizing, hey, Florida is actually kind of a really cool environment to start something and to be a part of a dynamic independent movement. And yeah, so that's how I got involved there. And there was, again, 2021. And
Now, were you on the Andrew Yang gang? Were you part of his campaign, or you just kind of were aware who he was?
I was, I was mildly Yang gang. So 2019 was sort of the big year for that. Again, it's 2020 cycle, but this was kind of early buildup, and I was inspired by that dynamism. And I was also one of this. I think the number is like 40% of his campaign supporters or his supporters that did not agree with his stance on UBI. And I thought that was really interesting. I didn't realize there were so many of us, but I thought looking back, that was really telling that, hey, you can be inspired by someone who is putting out these really dynamic ideas and really offering some cool solutions and cool ways of thinking, even if you don't agree with those particular cool solutions and interesting ways of thinking. And that as a kind of model for independent momentum and independent success really stuck with me. So yeah, I was very much inspired by Yang, just the style of his campaign, the tenor of his campaign, and that was how I managed to hear about Forward and join Forward within a month of its formation.
Yeah, I have similar feelings about Andrew Yang. I think he's an interesting guy. I think he's an interesting communicator. I don't agree with everything he has to say or everything with his personality, but he has very heterodox views. So UBI on one end, but maybe more conservative views on others. So I think he's an interesting person. And the Forward Party has evolved over the years. So he was the founder, but now you have a whole new leadership team and everything. So tell me a little bit about you being the chair of the Florida Forward Party, and did you help recruit candidates? Did you have any candidates? Were there any that any wins down there, and or did you get close? Somebody did really well or anything like that.
So we had a couple wins more. We had wins at the one win at the state level and a couple more local. We were recruiting. So backing up a little bit, I was president of the Florida Forward Party from 2022 to 2024. And yeah, we had the one big election cycle in there where we did recruit candidates. One of my big things, even though I didn't vote on whom to endorse, I was part of the team. First of all, I was out trying to find these candidates, recruit these prospective candidates, these prospective endorsees, and also trying to make sense and offer up what our criteria would be for endorsement and understanding how to frame that within what Forward was trying to be and what our state party was trying to be was a really interesting challenge for me. Um, and so, for us, it came down to the big five was dignity, which was just engaging civilly in civic discourse, humility, which refers to intellectual humility, treating complex problems as complex problems, transparency, responsiveness, just engaging your constituents, and just focus, which is being serious about the race that you're running. And I was very proud of the work that I did on that criteria set, and we got some really really cool candidates that we worked with. Like I said, some were successful, some were less successful. Some of those less successful, I do still feel bad about, because I think there were factors that maybe we could have been more aware of, or maybe we should have calculated a little differently.
So just so you know, I'm doing that work here
Mm,
in Northern Virginia,
mm,
and I helped to recruit. Gosh, at this point, over 3 cycles, probably eight can well, we're going on to our 4th cycle, so 8 candidates over the last 4 years. So, I'm very proud of that, and I'm actually very comfortable with the candidate pledge that the Forward Party puts
sure.
out there. And although some forwardists disagree with this, I'm also very comfortable with not having a hard and fast platforms and on issues and purity test and all the things that the Democrats and the Republicans have. More with the Democrats because they have issues. The Republicans, it's really just fealty to Donald Trump and everything. But I like doing that work. I like recruiting candidates and helping them during their campaigns,
So
and I'm still active with the Forward Party. I think they're doing good work, although we got a long way to go because they just don't have the money, resources, or people to really make a big difference at this point.
yeah, I think, yeah, to your point on the pledge, we never had any problem with the pledge, with the text of the pledge or any pledge. But I'm sure we have problems with the text of some pledges out there.
That's right.
But I think the key for us in sort of formulating election criteria is someone running for political office can promise anything, and you need to have a guideline for how to assess where they're at, given their full suite of messaging, given their political experience, given what they've demonstrated, and the manner in which they conduct their campaign. And just having that I think, it's not applicable necessarily to other state parties and the way that they run, was just valuable for us to be able to quantify at times and be able to understand, just make sense of where these candidates were at.
Yeah, and I had a similar. I'll put it in air quotes, but a criteria is,
Mm.
I want the candidates to be serious candidates, right?
Absolutely.
And there are some candidates who are unserious, and let's be frank, they just want to see their name on the ballot, or it's some ego thing, right? Now, ego has a place in running for office, and I look the potential candidates in the eye, and I say, look, you need to look up there on the dais of the county board or the board of supervisor and say, I think I can do that job better than that person up there does it,
Mm.
right? If you don't feel that in your heart, then you're kind of wasting a lot of people's time, right? You have to want to feel that you can do the job, being a small town mayor or on a school board or something like that. And if you don't really have that feeling that you can do the job, then you're going to waste a lot of people's time. So that's kind of how I felt.
Yeah, it's wanting to do the job. It is, yeah, and this is just seriousness. I'll echo that. And just second that all the way. And it's seriousness about doing the job. It's seriousness about winning the election. That doesn't mean you should expect to win necessarily, but you need to have a pathway. You need to have a vision of what it's going to take for you to win the election. And then, the third thing is wanting that job. And I think what is most offensive to voters, when you have these local offices and state offices that have real legislating or governing power, and real power over important decisions and parts of people's lives, when people try to use those as a stepping stone, I think that really just undermines any kind of message that they will put out there. So,
Well,
yeah.
well, and then there are, I mean, this is a very shady thing to do, but there are people who I believe, it just kind of seemed that way, that um, they want to get their name on the ballot because they're like a real estate agent or a personal financial
Sure.
advisor. And if their names are on yard signs and names on the ballot, it will help them get business. And that's not a good way to run for office either. So,
No.
uh, hey, let's talk a little bit about. So you recently published a book called "Common Ground from the Ground Up." Can you
No.
tell us about your motivations to write the book, and then some of the themes that are within the book?
So coming around to go back a little while, and I mentioned actually, it's funny that you sort of asked about my college experience and how that informed my political leanings or political activity. And I really wasn't focused much on politics in college. I'd say overall, I studied business, and that is where my background is. That is the science that I'm most familiar with, and that is what I tried to apply, because what I realized in both the independent space and the bridging space, there is a problem of a more idealist mindset without kind of that realist, pragmatist, business way of thinking, grounding it and guiding it to viability. The way that manifests in the bridging space, and this is what the book is all about, is you can have let's all get along, and you can make any number of groups and initiatives based on this. And the people who are going to join are those who actively seek out getting along with everyone else. And if you rely entirely on that as your call to action, if you rely entirely on that kind of moral imperative that underlies that, then what you have is an opt-in. And what you have is not going to reach those who need depolarization the most. And so my work with the book, what I tried to do with the book is lay out the case, hey, these tools of interacting, being curious, being able to engage constructively and productively with those you may not agree with. These, this is not a moral end in itself, or not just a moral end in itself. This is the best way for you to heal relationships that need to be healed, to get your voice across, and be the best advocate that you can be of the things that you believe, and to be the most productive, if you should choose, the most productive advocate of your ideas within the democratic process that you can be. And I talk about the sort of the political applications of it because there's an important intersection of that bridging and political innovation space, and a question that comes up sometimes in these bridging circles where it's like, okay, we're all holding hands and singing Kumbaya, but what difference is it going to make if the politics, the sort of the political product is still the same and the politicians are still behaving the same way? And so really painting that and painting the way that we can apply these bridge building techniques, these constructive dialogue techniques, it was to the political process and to enacting and impacting political change. I think that was an important message to put out there.
Yeah, I'm tangentially involved with some of the bridging organizations, but I'm more focused myself on political reform organizations and the Forward Party, which is about candidates winning elections, and also, as you know, with my Substack and podcast, Independence for America. So I'm also involved in, how do we help independent and minor party candidates win elections? So what are some of the other bridging organizations that you're familiar with and maybe involved with?
So Braver Angels was one of the first ones that I became, really actively involved with. I know there are a few that do workshops, and those are increasing in popularity, and particularly on college campuses. I'll highlight Disagreeing Better, which is a more recent initiative from a Harvard professor. I'll highlight Constructive Dialogue Institute, which is an offshoot of Jonathan Haidt in his work, which I'm a big fan of. And there's a lot of these groups that have sort of emerged and are trying to create avenues to more positive dialogue, to more positive interaction. I will say a lot of them sort of stop short of trying to, or encourage their members to stop short of trying to persuade those with whom they interact. And I do think that undersells the bridging space and undersells what you can have with a curious mindset, a constructive mindset, and an approach to conversation, which is the way I like to frame it, and the way I like to frame it in the book, which is more additive, which is more, let's learn from each other.
Yeah, going into all these interactions with curiosity is a really big thing. So a few other ones that you didn't mention. So I'm involved in More Perfect Union, which is changing their name to the Brickyard. And so that was founded by veterans. And so I'm also involved in, I'm the post commander for my local Veterans of Foreign War post. And there's actually an MOU between those two organizations, and we host some of their dinners. They've also partnered, I don't know much about them, but they've partnered with Longer Tables. So it's all about having dinner together and having discussions and dialogue and things like that. So, and then you're probably familiar with some of the ranked choice voting and open primaries organizations. And I'm very active in those organizations because I do think, and Unite America is the kind of the overarching philanthropic organization for political reform. And I think we have a broken system. The system is not working well, so we need to change the system. Now, the challenge of that is that
I would be careful about that wording. This is a caution I send to anyone within that space. We need to change the system. Changing the system and creating reforms, and particularly when they're not nationwide reforms, these are pathways that empower more competition, more voices to rise up, and all of that. Now, that where I encourage everyone to sort of be wary and to stop short at times is predicating any change upon any kind of impactful change upon a systemic overhaul or a systemic reform or any particular goal within this movement, because there is a kind of an iterative nature to what we're doing insofar as we're trying a lot of different things in different areas. We're pushing a lot of different things in different areas. Now, I will say what Good Party has done, what a lot of local independent candidates have done in terms of model success, in terms of create pathways to viable competition and show what independent leadership can be. They've won thousands of elections at the local level, and we do not want to ever, undersell what they have accomplished and what they can accomplish. Now, my work primarily right now as a political consultant is with candidates largely at the federal level who are running, and a lot of them are running in strongholds. A lot of them are running in areas where there's really only one party in power, and they can position themselves as coalition builders, as the most credible challenger. And they can use that momentum from these sort of Good Party candidates, from all these incredible local and state level candidates, and all that they've modeled and all of the thinking and doing that they've done, and really have pathways to competition now. And that can make a tremendous, tremendous impact. This is not to, to push back against any particular reform. I like the reform ideas. I like a lot of these movements and these organizations. They're very well intentioned, but I do push back as a general rule against the notion that we need a particular structural change to have any hope or to have any sense of, change in the results that we have. Because what all of these candidates and what all of these different organizations, and I'll include the bridging space and the social momentum they build in that, it's a big deal. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Yeah, that's why I'm involved in both efforts. So I'm involved in the Forward Party and the independent candidate movement, but I'm also involved in some of the reform movements. I personally think they're both important. And they're not they don't they can both happen at the same time. The tricky part is that, and this is what a lot of reformers don't understand, is that you need to convince major party legislators to give more power to other people. So they have to, in order to implement a reform like ranked choice voting or open primaries, you're going to have to convince the sitting members of the House of your legislature in your state or in Congress to write a bill and shepherd it through committees and all that kind of stuff. Because unless the laws change for some of these reform, the only way a law changes is through the democratic process that we have right now, and the current sitting members are important. So, I give analogies to the women's suffrage movement and the civil rights movement. Is the only reason that women have the right to vote in America is that in the 19 teens there were men who decided to give women the right to vote, right? Obviously, there were women who were advocating for it, but it was the sitting members of, I think it was Montana was the first, who gave women the right to vote. And then the civil rights movement, it was similar. It was, white men who decided to write the Civil Rights Act and to get it passed and things like that. Lyndon Johnson and everything. So there were advocates, but there were sitting members who had to be the allies that helped get these across the finish line.
Yeah, and I think there's a valuable lesson in there that, people outside of your ideological or cultural in-group, there are ways to convince those people. There are ways to advocate, and preach to their sensibilities and appeal to them. This is part of what I talk about in the book. Right now, we have a sort of preaching to the choir way that we're used to talking about politics and engaging with politics. And if you move beyond that, you may be able to make inroads with audiences that you didn't think were possible. At the same time, I think one distinction that I'll draw, and I do, it's always important to temper the scope of what we're trying to do and to put that in context. Any kind of electoral reform, any kind of structural reform is not an end goal in itself. It is a manner by which we reach something. We reach a better politics. We reach a different kind of result. We reach a different kind of leadership. And having that in mind, and having those different pathways in mind that can get us there, is really valuable. Yeah, and to just understanding the bigger picture of it all and understanding what our actions right now can mean.
All right, so we're going to be wrapping up in a few minutes, but tell me about some inspiring independent / forward party candidates that you want to highlight on this podcast. Somebody that you really are impressed with, and they're really going to advance the movement, and hopefully we're going to get some wins this cycle.
Sure. Right now there are a handful of independents running for House and Senate that are a really big deal, that have been able to gain from the momentum that's been built up from the independent movement at the local, at the state level for years and years now. And I will...
Plus the frustration with the two major parties.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No, and this is a great political moment in terms of that momentum that's been built, in terms of voter sentiment, in terms of the tools that are out there that can allow them to compete against, massive major party war chests. So, yeah, to run through the big ones right now are Dan Osborne, and I'll name the senatorial ones just because we don't have all day. Dan Osborne in Nebraska, Brian Bangs in South Dakota, Todd Achilles in Idaho, Seth Bogner in Montana, and Ty Pinkins in Mississippi. These are really legitimate. They're all veterans, I believe, and they're just really exciting, legitimate, professional, independent campaigns that are carving pathways not only to independent success, but to real voter choice and real political competition in areas that have not had it in decades. So I'm very excited about what we can do for the independent movement in this cycle. I think, we can achieve higher heights than people realize often. And I want to give a shout out because I know so much of your audience is tied in with the local candidate work. Just how valuable all of that is, and all of those voices are, and all of their successes are in building this movement that we have now, and in continuing to build this movement. So, yeah, thank you to everyone at every level who has been involved with trying to make our politics better. And I'm excited to see where we go from here.
All right. Well, that's a good place to stop. Where can people find your book?
People can find the book on Amazon. It is Common Ground from the Ground Up. You can find it in all formats there. And then people can find my consulting. If you are a local or local, state, or federal candidates looking for support with consulting, branding, positioning, messaging at any level of any kind, unifierconsulting.com. That's UNIFIRE consulting.com. And that is where you can find my professional services.
All right. So thank you for listening to another episode of Independence for America. We hope you tune in to the next episode. Thank you.